Start us off, John, and lead us through some of the paragraphs there that we should look at.
Sure. I'll just read second paragraph and the third paragraph, which is talking about the Pharisee. And he is full of self-praise. He looks it, he walks it, he prays it, drawing apart from others as if to say, "Come not near to me, for I am holier than thou." He stands and prays with himself. Wholly self-satisfied, he thinks that God and men regard him with the same complacency. God, I thank thee, he says, that I am not as other men are, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this publican. He judges his character not by the holy character of God, but by the character of other men. His mind is turned away from God to humanity. This is the secret of his self-satisfaction. So she uses that term. I always, my ears perk up when I hear her say, "This is the secret of." It's like she's always going to point you to, like, here's the reason that he has this problem. And in this case, it seems to be that the reason is, one, he's judging others. He judges himself, his character, but then not by the holy character of God. So he isn't comparing himself to God or looking to God, but by the character of other men. And this has the result of turning his mind away from God and directing it fully on humanity.
That's probably a good context to understand what Paul was saying, right? When he said, I judge nothing. I don't even judge myself. And he tells us, judge nothing before the time. I don't know, that kind of fits.
For sure.
Because judging myself would be, I got to be comparing myself to somebody. So usually it's like this guy's doing.
Yeah.
Even if I'm doing worse than you, I'm still judging myself based on some other humans instead of just recognizing who and what I am as I look at Christ.
It's a tough thing. I think many of us do it automatically. And it takes relationship with God and knowing him and wanting to look at him and be like him to even recognize it in ourselves. Yeah.
It is kind of a I've been thinking about these concepts lately because I work with a woman who is a very giving woman. I mean, she's generous and is always thinking of other people, but she makes sure everybody knows it. And she's very vocal about all these wonderful things that she's doing for people. And she gives gifts to her trash people, and they've developed this nice friendship, and they give and they take. And now she sends presents to the poor and to her people, and she does all of these things, and she's always telling everybody what she does. So I'm like, well, that's nice that she does that, but why does she need to tell me about it? But then I'm like, well, is that me being petty about wondering about all that? and I don't know. So I've been thinking about that whole concept lately of extorting your good deeds to other people.
Doesn't that help a little bit in the next few paragraphs about that exact point, John?
Yeah. First
We
sentence
better
of the
read-
next paragraph. He
better
proceeds
read it.
he proceeds to recount his good deeds. I fast twice in the week. I give tithes of all that I possess. The religion of the Pharisee does not touch the soul. He is not seeking God likeness of character, a heart filled with love and mercy. He is satisfied with a religion that has to do only with what? The outward life. His righteousness is his own, the fruit of his own works, and judged by a human standard. Very important distinction being drawn there between true, I don't know if I want to even use the word religion,
Faith.
true faith versus self-made or self-righteous faith.
Would it be different if he would have said, instead of I fast, instead I give alms to the poor twice a week?
No, that's not the point being made. The point being made is that his heart, okay, so what's being pointed at is the heart, not the outward actions, right? So the outward actions are, in this guy's case, he's saying, the outward thing I want you to take notice of is that I pay my tithe very regularly and very religiously, and no one could ever accuse me of not paying my tithe. And I want you to notice that I do it twice a week and not just once, right? So he's pointing to the outward behavior as evidence of his righteousness, while the heart remains empty of what? Love and mercy.
So analyze that from the
guess-
other angle. Why, if someone is truly changed in the heart, why would they not also account the list? Whatever the list is, could be alms or could be tithes or could be, but this guy's very specifically recounting the list in his own mind. And yeah, he's saying it out loud, but the guy that's truly converted in the heart, why does he not recount the list?
Right. I guess I just take the position of who am I to judge what her motives are? But
That's
I
a
do
Not a
find
bad
it,
position.
but I just find it kind of interesting. So I'm like, well, should I be telling other people what I'm doing?
Well, and what's good about your question, Chris, is because if I then determine, because this person is recounting the list, oh, look, they're not doing as good as me. Well, then I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm judging me by judging them, meaning I'm comparing
Right.
them and me. So
Yeah,
my
you're right.
question that I think we got to figure out is, why doesn't the guy that's really changed in the heart, why doesn't he recount a list?
So
That's not where he, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kristen.
no, yeah, go ahead, Krista.
Oh, well, he does, that's not why he does those things. Plus,
the
he
list.
doesn't, yeah, he doesn't receive the same, he's not looking for the same type of affirmation that the other guy is. His
Good.
affirmation comes
From
from
himself.
inside. Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
There's the problem.
yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
I think some of it can be, we can look at it from that portion of scripture where Jesus says, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing in giving.
Mhm.
And that sort of thing. But again, what's the function of that? And so where my mind goes is that love is secure, and the behavior of broadcasting, delineating, whatever it is, all the things that I needed to do and that I'm good at, or that, hey, maybe you should do these too, or whatever it is. I think that that behavior comes from insecurity and from
Mm.
some kind of mechanism where the person always feels like, or often feels like, they are not affirmed enough, they're not valued enough, they're not fill in the blank. So here's one thing to
Looking for
consider is
validation.
exactly, yeah. I
Mm.
think one thing that's important to know is that love is completely secure. And one one evidence of that that looms large for me is that love does not pen the story himself or herself or themselves. In other words, he allows man and a bunch of men over a long period of time and women to get involved in the storytelling. So he's basically saying, look, it's clear that the evidence will substantiate truth. And I'm secure with letting you guys figure it out yourself and coming to the conclusion of what you want. And I think people who who broadcast their stuff, I think they're dealing with some kind of insecurity. And I
Mhm.
think that the right hand, left hand thing will lead us to a little bit of a rabbit trail, down a trail that will show us how the thing works. If we are secretive in our giving, then nobody takes the blessing from us. And we don't have a contest with ourselves. We do it because it's the right thing to do, to bless other
Mhm.
people. And actually, if we it's better to give than to receive, right? If we don't do it, then we'll dry up, we'll shrivel up.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I've struggled with the fact that Jesus seems to be contradicting himself in Scripture. So in one place, he's he's pointing out to the Pharisees a problem that they have, and he says to them, "You do your good works to be seen of men, but I do my works to be seen of my Father in heaven." So he's pointing out to them that that's an issue. But then later, in another place, he says to his disciples, "Do your good works to be seen of men." I'm like, wait a minute, what is he talking about? Like it's almost like he's saying the exact opposite. But one, the audience that he's talking to is different. Like, so there's a difference right there. And two, a disciple who knows God and has love and mercy in his heart will do good works naturally, not to receive praise, not to build themselves up or to attain their own righteousness, but it's coming out of a love of the master, a love of their friend Jesus, and it comes out of the heart. It doesn't come out of a self-righteous motivation or a motivation to attain my own righteousness, which is, again, I mean, this whole chapter is really can be boiled up down to the difference between Cain and Abel's altar. Cain did his works to earn the favor of God, to be the one in control of whether or not he was blessed. Abel did it because he saw his own great need and he
Al-
loved the Lord.
Also, John, think about it also. What you're saying is so true, because by sharing that fruit or that character of God to others attracts others. So there's a
Yes.
natural attraction for that. And they'll ask, what is this you have? And then
Right.
you get to share it again. So that's the beauty of it.
And that too is demonstrated in Scripture, right? So Jesus, men said of him, I don't know what it is, but no man has ever spoke like this man, right? And they noted the difference between how the religious Pharisees talked and acted, and right, versus Jesus, who you could say had 100% Holy Spirit in his heart. He was filled completely with love and mercy. And so his good deeds were truly good, springing from a fount of crystal clear water that was everlasting water. So,
So right in the parable itself, here's how we see the effect of the question sort of play out. The first guy is taught religion, and in the religion there's a list, and you're supposed to do these things, and so he does them, and he needs somebody to pay attention because of everything you guys said about insecurity and needing to have, be valued and all those things. But watch what happens to the second guy as you guys read further into the chapter. The second guy who gets a view that he's the worst sinner on the planet, that he has done nothing to deserve any good thing, and beats his chest. Once he sees that, after that, he's never going to be excited again about talking about his list. Instead, he's going to be excited about talking about whose list?
God's.
God's list. And so out of his mouth will constantly spring comments and observances about, look what God did here, and look what God did there, and God's so amazing. And I don't mean they become a Bible thumper like that. I mean, truly what they're excited about is what Jesus was like and what Jesus did. And you'll hear it because of what comes out of their mouth on a regular basis versus anything to do with their list, because their list they learned wasn't really worth anything anyway. But until then, that list seems pretty valuable. So the more correct you can get your list to match, the requirements in the Bible itself, the more sort of exalted in your own eyes you can become. The list is closer and closer and closer.
So
like this morning, we were commenting about how he didn't just pay tax on the whole income or the gross, right? Because he wanted to make sure it was ahead of everybody.
Yeah. So the first sentence of paragraph 151, paragraph 3, just made me think of something. So it says the publican. So this is the second guy. The publican had gone to the temple with other worshipers. He's going to church. But he soon drew apart from them as unworthy to unite in their churchiness, right? Their religion. What's interesting, if you think about it, well, what is it that's separating him from them? Well, he's left to feel that he is unworthy, unholy, not like those holy men over there, those Pharisees. Think about what the disciples said to Jesus. Jesus, what was his statement about the Pharisees? He said, unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the Pharisees, you cannot enter into the kingdom of heaven. That was like a hard blow to the disciples. They're like, wait a minute, what how, I thought those guys were the good ones. I thought those guys were the holy ones, and you're telling me I have to be more holy than them? It actually kind of definitely caused them to question Jesus. What do you mean by that? But I see that activity happening here where, and by the way, doesn't that speak to our common belief that if you're not going to church, you're not in a good place with God?
Question though.
Yeah.
Isn't that just the starting point though?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I'm just throwing this out there. We can become so down and so, how would you say it? How can God forgive me because of the way I am? See what I'm saying? You can almost go the full opposite direction.
Too far. Yeah.
Yes. But he's at the point where now his heart is malleable. God can work with him. Does that
Well,
make
wouldn't you
sense?
say the adulteress thrown at his feet was maybe in that position as well? Maybe
Oh,
even
definitely.
further. Maybe even further.
Yes.
I mean, in fact, her life was about to be ended as far as she knew. Probably felt she deserved it, but God stepped in.
What other parts do we need to read, John, about the first guy? Did we get everything we needed off about the first guy?
Let's see. There's just one other paragraph. Whoever trusts in himself that he is righteous will despise others. As the Pharisee judges himself by other men, so he judges other men by himself. His righteousness is estimated by theirs, and the worse they are, the more righteous by contrast he appears. His self-righteousness leads to accusing other men he condemns as transgressors of God's law. Ooh, those darn Sabbath breakers. Thus he is making manifest the very spirit of Satan, the accuser of the brethren. With this spirit, it is impossible. Wow, that's a very strong word. It is impossible for him to enter into communion with God. He goes down
Strong,
to
but I
his,
agree with it.
yeah, he goes down to his house destitute of the divine blessing.
No justification there.
Nope.
So
It's
what's the answer
impossible.
then to the question if somebody asks, why do I struggle? Well, I forgot the word that was used. Uh, Loathing others or detesting others, or at the beginning of the paragraph. Detesting others.
Despise others.
Despise. Yeah. So someone asks, what is my problem? Why do I struggle so much despising other people?
Because you judge yourself by other men, and you also judge other men by yourself.
So, i.e., because you believe you're better than them?
And or you believe they are better than you. Or
you
worse than you.
despise them because they're better than you?
Or because they're worse than you. Either way, you're going to despise them.
You're gonna despise them? Yeah.
Well, the key there is you're comparing yourself to others either way,
Yeah.
or comparing them to you, and that neither of those are the standard.
Well, would you say that it's a universal truth that we do all kinds of things out of insecurity?
Sure.
So being that is probably true. I mean, I can think of a whole bunch of things for myself. I think people struggle with judging others and judging themselves because they simply don't know how love works. And I think this is the kind of the thing that helped me when I started understanding what Jennings was getting at, was to ask how things function, how reality works, design law, that sort of thing. So I think, all of the efforts to understand how love works and what love wants, and to pull away all of the lies that the longer we've been in church and as a Christian, the more lies we've been exposed to. I think that is the exercise to help us to become non-condemning and to stop doing the things that we do out of insecurity.
Well, I can just share from my own personal experience on this one, because I will raise my hand and say I have a judging problem. And I will also raise my hand and say the only thing that helps me with that problem is to keep my eyes on Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Not only to see his pure goodness, but to recognize it as the standard by which I want to be, the standard by which I should compare myself to. And then I see how far I am from that standard. But at the same time, and this maybe connects to what you just said, Wendell, the love that is part of that standard is for me as well, even though I am a sinner with a judging problem.
Yep.
And so in that, there is salvation. Whereas if I'm only looking at a list of do's and don'ts, I can find no means of salvation. I have to know Jesus. I have to see the truth about God, or I am lost, completely lost, because my only recourse is to become self-condemning. If all I see is you should not do X and you should not do Y, and then I look at that and I go, I've done X and Y 1,000 times. Well, then I'm dead.
Yeah.
I'm a goner.
Mm-hmm.
So I need Jesus. I need to look into his face and see that there is salvation. There is someone who not only lives the law, he is the law, and he shows me that the law is healing. The law is good, and he's offering it as a balm to my sin weary heart.
So for all that, we better read something about the second guy.
Yeah, we should.
Hopefully we at least get to some of the stuff about Peter. It's pretty big stuff in here.
All right. Well, I certainly don't have to do all the reading. Does someone else want to kind of
What
take the second
paragraph?
guy?
Oh, let me see.
Let's see. Second guy, kind of his story starts in 151, paragraph 3.
The publican had gone? That
Mhm.
one?
Yep.
How far do you want me to read?
How about 2 paragraphs there?
Okay. The publican had gone to the temple with other worshippers, but he soon drew apart from them as unworthy to unite in their. Yes?
Okay.
To unite in their devotions. Standing afar off, he would not lift up so much as his eyes unto heaven, but smote upon his breast. In bitter anguish and self-abhorrence, he felt that he had transgressed against God, that he was sinful and polluted. He could not expect even pity from those around him, for they looked upon him with contempt. He knew that he had no merit to commend him to God, and in utter self-despair he cried, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. He did not compare himself with others. Overwhelmed with a sense of guilt, he stood as if alone in God's presence. His only desire was for pardon and peace. His only plea was the mercy of God. And he was blessed. I tell you, Christ said, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. The Pharisee and the publican represent two great classes into which those who come to worship God are divided. The first two representatives are found in the first two children that were born into the world. Cain thought himself righteous, and he came to God with a thank offering. He made no confession of sin and acknowledged no need for mercy. But Abel came with the blood that appointed to the Lamb of God. He came as a sinner, confessing himself lost. His only hope was the unmerited love of God. The Lord had respect to this offering, but to Cain and his offering, he had no respect. The sense of need, the recognition of our poverty and sin, is the very first condition of acceptance with God. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Boom. Any thoughts on that, Krista?
My first thought was it's one extreme to the other. But the overall point is that when we look to ourselves in comparison to the Heavenly Father, we're going to see all of the aspects of our lives and our hearts that sin has cemented in there. It's almost like turning to God helps illuminate need for Him, because it points out the areas that we so much need His help in overcoming. And the Pharisee just was not able to accept that. In his mind, he himself, with his power and his good works, was going to overcome any weaknesses in his life, whereas the publican was the opposite. He acknowledged the need for God to help him overcome the weaknesses in his life.
Yeah,
I
the
have a question.
sentence stated there very specifically of what you're talking about is, he came as a sinner, confessing himself lost. His only hope was the unmerited love of God.
I think partly why this scenario is described with so much level of what feels like despair is because think of the context in which this man was, meaning in Jesus' time, say at the temple with the teachers of the law, teaching what they were teaching. There was nothing in their teaching that gave any assurity of God's mercy or surety of God going to take care of this man. He was kind of, by their theology, left with nothing but despair. So imagine the story actually happening as or just before Jesus tells the story, and that guy's still on his knees, and he hears Jesus say, "That man will go home justified." I mean, that's quite a shocking, explosion in the middle of the context of which this story is taking place.
So poor in spirit, another word would be like low in spirit, or basically humble then, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not dependent on one's righteousness.
So you have to be low in spirit for God to work with you. You have to be poor in spirit, or basically humble.
At least recognize your need and see your utter failure at, accomplishing, I guess, the perfection that you were trying to get.
And that goes back to the lady that was caught in adultery, or this publican. They were definitely low in spirit. They were definitely realizing, like John was saying earlier, I've done that 1,000 times. And that's when God can work with you.
Well, I think that he can work in any situation, but the work that he does when you're ready actually causes the good stuff to happen for yourself. So it's sort of like sowing and reaping in a way,
Yeah,
right? I mean, isn't he always there? He's standing at the door and knocking, and he's always ready to go,
Oh,
So
I agree with that. I'm just saying the conversion process. If you're not low in spirit, if you're not humble, can God truly work with you?
Sure. And I agree with that too. It's hard.
so let me throw maybe a wrench into this, but I'm going to try and make a point here. I hope I don't go too far off track, but the great white throne judgment. The basic understanding of that is that the books are opened and God judges men from those books. And in those books are written every thought, every intention of the heart, every deed, both good and bad. All of your story is written in those books. So imagine you're standing before God as he opens your book and he starts to read out all the terrible things you've done. If you were that self-righteous Pharisee and your book is being opened, what's your natural reaction going to be? Anyone want to tackle that question?
Self-defense.
Okay.
Well,
Why?
look at all the good things that I did.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Didn't Jesus even have that, tell that story about when he comes and there will be those who,
But we did all these things in your name.
that's right. And if that doesn't satisfy God, because by the way, he's going to go, well, yeah, but look at the state of your heart, right? He's going to continue to force the truth on them, right? It's not going to be varnished. It's going to be the truth. Now, same situation, but now the publican is standing there. And God says, you know, it really wasn't good that you were a tax collector, and right, he lists out all the problems. But what is the tendency of the heart of the publican to say?
Yes, Lord, all those things are true because he's humble.
And have mercy on me, a sinner,
A sinner.
right? He's trusting in his own, he realizes he's come to the place where he understands his only hope is the mercy and love of God. And I believe that he can be saved in that situation because God can then, and this is my words, right? God can then ask him, well, do you want to be saved? Do you want to be like me? Do you want to be healed?
I'm wondering if we're really going to feel condemned when he starts reading that out.
Well, I didn't say feeling condemned. I'm just saying the truth is going to be revealed.
Oh, I know it's going to be revealed, but we're going to be with our Maker.
Mm-hmm.
So we will know his, if you have that relationship, you should know his compassion.
Good. Right.
So,
but what was the relationship with the Father between the Pharisee and God?
God will say, I never knew you.
Well, it depends on which Pharisee. I know a couple Pharisees.
Well, we're talking about the one in the parable.
I know.
So again, and I like Sherry gave the right answer. What is it?
I never
Apart
knew
from
you.
me, I never knew you. The one thing about the publican that's an amazing truth is while the whole world is condemning him for what he is and who he is, he receives no love from the world or the people around him. He recognizes his need of God, and that's what he's reaching out for. It's a stark contrast in my mind, a very stark contrast, and probably because I've recognized both of those moments in my heart, both being a Pharisee and realizing my absolute and complete need of the unmerited love and favor of God.
I'm going to try reading starting on page 150 now. Paragraph starts, no man.
Which one?
I think it's 159. Might be the first paragraph. No man. And maybe take 2 or 3 paragraphs right here.
No,
Are you looking for a reader?
that one goes real deep.
Yeah, read maybe 3 paragraphs there, Barb.
The one that starts, no man can of himself understand his errors. That one.
Yes, except your robot's not talking very
I'm
good.
taking it as a yes. Okay.
There,
No
now we can
man
hear-
can of himself understand his errors. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Is it further? Oh, okay. You want me to start? I'll try it one more time here. No man can fall above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Well, that the heart does not acknowledge. Maybe swelling with the conceit of way only can a true knowledge of self be obtained. We must behold Christ. It is ignorance of him that makes men so uplifted in their own righteousness. When we contemplate his purity and excellence, we shall see in our own weakness and poverty and defects. We shall see our own weakness and poverty and defects as they really are. We shall see ourselves lost and hopeless, clad in garments of self-righteousness, like every other sinner. We shall see that if we are ever saved, it will not be through our own goodness, but through God's infinite grace. The prayer of the publican was heard because it showed dependence reaching forth to lay hold upon omnipotence. Self to the publican appeared nothing but shame. Thus it must be seen by all who seek God. By faith, faith that renounces all self-trust, the needy suppliant is to lay hold upon infinite power. No outward observances can take the place of simple faith and entire renunciation of self. But no man can empty himself of self. We can only consent for Christ to accomplish the work. Then the language of the soul will be, Lord, take my heart, for I cannot give it. It is thy property. Keep it pure, for I cannot keep it for thee. Save me in spite of myself, my weak, unchristlike self. Mold me, fashion me, raise me into a pure and holy atmosphere where the rich current of thy love can flow through my soul.
Oof.
This is good. You want me to keep going?
There's some gospel right there. My goodness.
Well, so I was thinking in the context of John's question about the judgment day, and the righteous have been with Christ for 1,000 years, but does everything you just read, will that still apply for the righteous people?
Oh yeah, now you're getting into timeline. That could apply right here and now as a moment of judgment, meaning I'm coming closer and closer to the reality of who Christ
But my
is.
question wasn't, when does it start? My question was, will it have ended before the great white throne? Meaning, will they still have that same view of things even then?
If you're meaning that same view as what was just read,
Yeah, what was just read.
I would hope so.
I would think there would still be a need for dependence.
Well,
In
because
fact, it should have increased.
Well, but my point is, at first glance, it appears to be sounding like gloom and doom. And yet, even after spending 1,000 years with Christ, I think you're correct, but let's connect with it beyond just theoretically that, well, of course they're going to, depend on themselves less. Now look at it from the context of after 1,000 years with him, how much less they will have any trust in their ability to be righteous
Yeah.
or to accomplish righteousness. We don't usually, usually we think, well, should feel that now, and then later we're going to get righteous. And surely by the time it's the wicked's turn, we'll be able to say, well, see, we did good and you're in trouble.
Well, I
is the
know in
attitude-
my life,
Go ahead.
sorry. I know in my life, the more times I try to do things on my own, and obviously fail, the more what should I say? I don't know if the word is frightened, but the more hesitant I am to rely on myself. As far as decisions and things like that, it's like, Lord, thy will be done. And it's I can't imagine that would ever lessen. I think it would, the more I am aware of my weaknesses and my humanity, the more I rely on him. And I just can't imagine that getting any less, because there's just so much more of him that I need. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't think that we'll be at that point, Bobby. I think we'll still be dependent on him.
Well, I think, if we press it, we're never going to get to the point where we can go, okay, good, I got it now. So,
right.
I mean, it's a little bit obvious, but when I think about it at an emotional level, when you read this description about, no man can even know himself, nor trust in himself, nor even see his own sinfulness unless the Holy Spirit show it to him. I mean, that's a lot of stuff to think of. Wow, after being in heaven for God for 1,000 years, it's true, we're going to be more acquainted with that position of thought than before, I'd say. Because the closer we come to Christ, the more faulty we appear in our own eyes.
Right.
But there might be more good stuff there if you wanted to read further.
Well, it would seem too that the more you coming, have experience with God, the more you learn to trust him. So the more willing you are to ask his opinion of things or something like that, so the trust would just keep growing. And so you would feel more need of him, maybe.
Was there more we should read there?
I like the next paragraph.
Yeah,
I'll go
I'm
ahead.
reading on because it's good. Go ahead, Frank.
Okay, go.
It is not only at the beginning of the Christian life that this renunciation of self is to be made. At every advance step heavenward, it is to be renewed. All our good works are dependent on a power outside of ourselves. Therefore, there needs to be a continual reaching out of the heart after God, a continual earnest, heartbreaking confession of sin and humbling of the soul before him. Only by constant renunciation of self and dependence on Christ can we walk safely. You want me to keep reading?
Yep.
The nearer we come to Jesus, and the more clearly we discern the purity of his character, the more clearly we shall discern the exceeding sinfulness of sin, and the less we shall feel like exalting ourselves. Those whom heaven recognizes as holy ones are the last to parade their own goodness. Interesting. The Apostle Peter became a faithful minister of Christ, and he was greatly honored with divine light and power. He had an active part in the upbuilding of Christ's church. But Peter never forgot the fearful experience of his humiliation. His sin was forgiven, yet well he knew that for the weakness of character which had caused his fall, only the grace of Christ could avail. He found in himself nothing in which to glory.
Confirms a lot of the things that we've talked about.
I feel a lot of humility going on. I don't hear anybody talking.
I was thinking about how, was it John this morning that was talking about if you're dead to self and somebody, I can't remember exactly how you framed it, but somebody says something offensive to you, you could rise up and defend yourself. If you were alive to self, you would. If you were dead to self, you wouldn't. And I was thinking about that when you were reading a continual, earnest, heartbreaking confession of sin and humbling of the soul. There needs to be a continual reaching out after the heart for Christ, a continual, earnest, heartbreaking confession of sin and humbling of the soul before him. Only by constant renunciation of self and dependence on Christ can we walk safely. It's like Paul's statement of dying daily. You need it because somehow it's like this zombie experience where it just keeps coming back to life and you need to lay it back down again. And why does it keep surging again? Like, what's with that?
Yeah, zombies are alive for all the wrong reasons.
Gotta kill those zombies. It appears that it's connected, the idea of looking away from Christ to either others or to self will automatically lower our conception of his purity and holiness. We're talking about goodness, love, grace, kindness, all the things that are amazing about Jesus. And in the lowering of those things, in our understanding, in our view, will enable us to see and feel better about ourselves. Versus looking at Christ keeps us constantly understanding that, yeah, you know what, and I'm not like that. Naturally.
I'll go further, Bobby. It's not just self, but it's also how you look at others as well. When you look at Christ, you realize he loves them as much. So why do I feel superior to that person? I should never feel superior to another person. Because that person is also God's creation.
Yeah. That's the positive effect of keeping Christ in the view. It raises our own value, not because we're righteous, but because we see our value in the eyes of Jesus. Simultaneously, it raises the value of all those around us, no matter how wicked and or evil they have been also. Because we can finally begin to admit that, yeah, you know what, I might not have used the knife to stab that guy and kill him, but murder was already rooted in my heart. It's what made me look down on the others in the first place and think of myself as doing better than them, right? Because that's where it starts to look when we're seeing Christ clearly.
think sometimes the devil can get us to focus too much on our shortcomings and our weaknesses. And I think it also goes back to what Wendell was talking about self-esteem. And when we look at God, he helps us see the good things in ourselves and therefore the good things in other people. But the devil could certainly sometimes turn our hearts into seeing all the bad, so to speak, and making us
Yeah.
feel that we are not worthy and that there's no way that we could ever. I think that's why works is so dangerous, because it puts so much emphasis on what we do, what we have to do in order to achieve acceptance by God. And it's all about us, what we do, instead of keeping our eyes on the Lord and what he can do.
Yeah, something, Krista, I think about when what you said, how Lucifer likes to make you feel you're unworthy. When you feel that way, just remember Christ came down to claim me as a sister or as a brother.
Right.
If he came to claim me as family, I am not unworthy.
Right.
So there's a line.
Oh, go ahead, Wendell.
Sorry, there's a line, I think, between, being like overconfident or boastful or whatever, and what healthcare workers call self-care. So, if you don't self-care, like take, for example, hydration, and this is kind of a common thing for the ladies, but if you don't hydrate, like UTI is kind of a common problem. And so what happens is if one doesn't self-care, it burdens other people. So one of the things that I think that we miss sometimes in the idea of being not being concerned about ourselves is this aspect of self-care, so that we are not a burden to other people. And if we're unencumbered, we can be more effective as a helper to other people when they want help. So that's a thing that I think we lose sight about as Christians, where, okay, God gets all the glory, he does all the work, but there's this aspect of being a willing vessel that is ready and able to go because you've taken care of your personal things.
So, Wendell, according to what we've been reading, what would it mean to do self-care?
Well, I mean, you would take the things in the natural and apply them to the spiritual. So in the natural, you need, 8 to 10 hours of sleep. You need to hydrate 12 cups of water a day, whatever it is. Those things. And I think if you look at with other folk, if we are self-caring and we know the goodness of good health and being ready and all of that and being unencumbered, then we should have compassion for people who are not well, they're not healed. Salvation, healing, same concept, right? So the idea would be to have more compassion on people, with people, whatever it is,
But if you're not capable of that, I guess the one statement that I think tells me my part in self-care, in one way only can a true knowledge of self be obtained. And here's the thing we have to do: we must behold Christ.
Yeah.
End of sentence.
So see, Krista, if you start there, paragraph starts in harmony. Take that paragraph and the next one together, read, see if that helps us with what, I'm just going to use the words you guys are bouncing around, what self-care in spiritual terms will be.
Let me blow it up a little bit more, just a minute. Alrighty. In harmony with this experience is the command, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God which worketh in both to will and to do his good pleasure. God does not bid you fear that he will fail to fulfill his promises, that his patience will weary, or his compassion be found wanting. Fear lest you shall not be held in subjection to Christ's will, lest your hereditary and cultivated traits of character shall control your life. It is God which worketh.
Well, hold on. You went,
Yeah.
so let's figure out what that is. What'd you say?
Well, fear lest your will shall not be held in subjection to Christ's will. Did I read that right?
Yep.
Lest your hereditary and cultivated traits of character shall control your life.
So if it's God who works
That's
in
kind
us,
of, yeah, go ahead.
No, you go.
Lest
Like
your
fear the
hereditary
zombie
and cultivated.
experience.
Pardon? Oh, the making me do it.
I said
Not-
fear the zombie experience.
Oh.
In other words, this whole thing is talking about total dependence on Christ, looking to Christ for him to work in us both to will and to do. So it doesn't say, look to him, learn from him, now make yourself do. It's saying we must totally surrender to God for him to will and to do, right? So don't fear that God can't do his part or can't keep his promise. Instead, be afraid that we would try to accomplish it without him, or that we would try to depend on ourselves to accomplish it, would be another way to say it.
Well, the
Fear.
one that's getting me, the one that I keep going back to is lest your hereditary and cultivated traits of character shall control your life.
Yes.
That's profound to me because, well, it's a throwback to, the sins shall, I don't remember. Yes, for what? How many generations?
3 to 4. Yes. So we visited 3 to 4 generations.
Right. And I think and your cultivated traits, those are the ones that you get from your environment.
Practiced.
And practiced. And in other words, to me, it's a blessing to know that just because I was born, I'm not saying this is the case, but let's say just because I was born into a family, and I was in an environment that was not healthy, just because that happened to me, it doesn't mean that I have to be controlled by that.
Excellent.
So to speak. So that's why, and also because one of my hobbies is genealogy, this whole idea of hereditary kind of jumped out at me too, because it's like, what did I inherit from my third great grandmother? Maybe there were some of these things that I deal with in my own life that have actually been passed down from generation to generation. So anyway, that's kind of one reason why I got stuck on that, but I'll keep going.
That's good, because
I like that, because I liked, it's funny because throughout this last half of the paragraph that she was reading, all fear is of self.
Yeah.
It says fear self, fear self, fear self. Doesn't say fear God. It's fear to trust to your own strength, fear to withdraw your hand from the hand of Christ, So
Yeah,
fear
be afraid
self.
be afraid of forgetting to trust and depend on God.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, good.
Fear
Go-
less. Oh,
Yeah, keep reading.
what?
Keep
Okay.
keep reading.
Fear lest self shall interpose between your soul and the great master worker. Fear lest self-will shall mar the high purpose that through you God desires to accomplish. That's a beautiful promise. Fear to trust to your own strength. Fear to withdraw your hand from the hand of Christ and attempt to walk life's pathway without his abiding presence. We need to shun everything that would encourage pride and self-sufficiency. Therefore, we should be aware of giving or receiving flattery or praise. It is Satan's work to flatter. He deals in flattery as well as in accusing and condemnation. Now that can be taken to extremes. But anyway, thus he seeks to work the ruin of the soul. Those who give praise to men are used by Satan as his agents. Let the workers of Christ direct every word of praise away from themselves. Let self be put out of sight. Christ alone is to be exalted. Unto him that loved us and washed us from our sins is in his own blood. Let every eye be directed and praised, upon every heart ascend.
Right, you can expand on what you were thinking there, Kristen.
I think that sometimes that Ellen White's words and things like this have been taken to extremes where children are raised without any positive words, positive feedback, because parents are afraid of flattering them. But I believe that the Lord is a positive God and that it's okay to tell your son that you're proud of him. It's okay to tell your daughter that she's pretty. You know, I that's why I was thinking along those lines.
Sure. And what's the difference between that and flattery? What's the problem behind flattery?
There's a difference between praise and flattery.
Explain.
Okay.
So flattery, you're just trying to
You have motive.
there's a motive behind it.
It's
okay.
manipulative.
Right, exactly. Praise, you're trying to uplift someone else's spirits. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a good distinction.
See, I was going to say that flattery is something that appeals to their pride.
Mm-hmm.
But when you take someone who is humble or who is poor in spirit or is feeling low self-value and you give them value, that's not appealing to pride. So that's the big distinction here is that, started with we should avoid everything that appeals to pride, everything that connects to pride.
Well, to go with what Chris is saying, there's two, like when a child is taking its first steps, you praise them because they're learning to take their same with a Christian as they are first taking their spiritual walk.
As soon as they go check me out, I can walk better than my brother.
That's when that's when they need a talking to.
They better not applaud at that moment anymore, right? Because we're seeing the difference between what Christ does to lift and encourage versus appealing to pride to, whatever.
Right.
But it's a good distinction to understand. Otherwise, yes, Krista, we could grow up, we could create environments where you better not say anything positive to anybody or anything negative.
Right.
So now you really shouldn't talk at all.
or have any kind of real relationship with anyone.
That's right.
I think the Psalms also says stuff about holding thy tongue.
Imagine trying to win a girlfriend if you couldn't say anything nice about her.
Right.
Did you want me to keep
I think-
going?
No,
I was just gonna say something real quick.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Barb.
I was just gonna say, in the view of the publican, because it talked about him feeling shame, but it was shame when he looked at self. I mean, it was a reasonable shame, but it made me think about this other quote I'm going to read from Steps to Christ. There are those who have known the pardoning love of Christ and who really desire to be children of God, yet they realize that their character is imperfect, their life faulty, and they are ready to doubt whether their hearts have been renewed by the Holy Spirit. Often have to bow down and weep at the feet of Jesus because of our shortcomings and mistakes, but we are not to be discouraged. Even if we are overcome by the enemy, we are not cast off, not forsaken and rejected of God. No, Christ is at the right hand of God, who also maketh intercession for us. So I really love that quote, and it just comes to mind thinking about the balance there of, we should feel embarrassed of self trying to do it and what self is capable of alone, but not time, because God doesn't leave us to our own devices. He's there and he loves us. And I mean,
Very good.
What is the reference in that Steps to Christ quote? If you don't mind.
let me go back for a second. That is 64.1.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if someone wants to read a little further, let's take the paragraph. It was when Moses, that one and the next one after that.
It was when Moses was hidden in the cleft of the rock that he beheld the glory of God. It is when we hide in the riven rock that Christ will cover us with his own pierced hand. And we shall hear what the Lord saith unto his servants. To us, as to Moses, God will reveal himself as merciful and gracious, long-suffering, and abundant in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin. The work of redemption involves consequences of which it is difficult for man to have any conception. Eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. As the sinner, drawn by the power of Christ, approaches the uplifted cross and prostrates himself before it, there is a new creation. A new heart is given him. He becomes a new creature in Christ Jesus. Holiness finds that it has nothing more to require. God himself is the justifier of him which believeth in Jesus. And whom he justified, them he also glorified. Great as is the shame and degradation through sin, even greater will be the honor and exaltation through redeeming love. The human being striving for conformity to the divine image there is imparted an outlay of heaven's treasure, an excellency of power that will place them higher than even the angels who have never fallen.
Ooh. So that's at least to connect with the joy that comes at the end, because where we started, remember, is this poor guy that's beating his chest, can't even look up into heaven, and cries out, "Have mercy on me, a sinner." John, you asked the question earlier about when we think of the context of the judgment, the books opened, the great white throne, and everybody being graded by or judged by what's in the books. It's not often that when we take that question into our minds that we think of the solution or the answer that looks like the second guy in this parable. It's natural for us, you started to say, to start defending, Lord, Sherry was saying, look at what I did over here and over there. Instead of realizing the only safe place is going to be to have already learned that I am a sinner like the rest, even more so maybe, to have what Paul described as knowing his own sin, chief among sinners, to be acquainted with that enough, to know that there's nothing we can hold up to go, but God, I at least accomplished this. And so there's no ability to look down on others in the second guy in this parable. Instead, his only safe place, and this is what's wonderful about the fact that Jesus said this guy went away justified, because he clung solely to God's mercy and God's ability, as we read the rest of the chapter, to work in him, to will and to do, to change what was inside of him. So
I think, and this is just me, I don't know, I won't know until I get there, but I truly believe when the books are open, that Christ will be holding us during those times.
sure.
I think he'll be with us. Yep, I really do.
Yeah, and I think what this guy in the parable was only at the beginning of learning, because we only get the piece of the story of he cried out, "Have mercy on me." But if we unfolded the rest of the story, it would be how he came to know Jesus, to understand Jesus, and could cling to and trust in Jesus to work in him, to change him. It wouldn't be to then come back and end up being like the Pharisee. Otherwise, we'd wreck the whole story and have to start over from the beginning.
I don't know if anyone else noticed this sentence in the last paragraph that Frank read, but it really stuck out to me. The one that said, "Holiness finds that it has nothing more to require." So we're always looking for, what is it that God requires of me, right? The rich young ruler, what must I do to be saved? Right? All those, you hear those questions all the time, and maybe even ask them yourself quite often. But apparently, the only thing that holiness requires, and it can find nothing else to require, is a sinner drawn by the power of Christ approaches the uplifted cross and prostrates himself before it. There he is a new creation. A new heart is given him. He becomes a new creature in Christ Jesus. Holiness finds that it has nothing more to require. Like, whoa, that's like a completed process. I don't even know how to describe how that sentence made me feel, but
that's a good springboard into next week's discussion.
Yeah.
Because that new heart leads to the desire for others.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, Frank, earlier today when we were commenting on how we needed this chapter first, I think it is because of that point right there.
Yep.
It's that point that makes the next chapter, or the previous chapter, which we'll do next week, really come alive and be understood.
Yes.
Yeah.
Broken, contrite heart. is all that holiness requires. Well, good. John, you want to have closing prayer for us? And then you guys can keep talking if you want, but we are at our ending time in case anybody needs to go. So let's have prayer, and then you guys can do what you'd like to do next.
All right. Father, wow, what a parable, what a rich blessing it's been to read this, to go through it again. Thank you for that. And thank you for the offer of salvation. Lord, we are most definitely sinners, and our hearts are deceitful. We fool ourselves very easily. And Lord, we, if nothing else, I hope that we can come away from this just realizing our great need, and that you are more than willing to supply it. So thank you for that, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I had a question
Have a
about
great week,
the
everybody.
Thanks for joining us, Krista.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the link.
Nice to see everybody else too, Chris and Elizabeth, and I see
Yeah.
Kimmy got on. Good to see Kimmy here. Hello.
Hi, Mommy.
But someone was going to ask a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is a question about the judgment, and I was just looking for that scripture about
Hi, Ani.
the sin separated from the east and the west, or something like that. Does anybody know about that?
You mean where in the Bible?
As far
that
as
is?
the east is from the west?
Yeah.
If you just Google
what
it,
does say?
it should come up.
Yeah. Oh, here it is. It's in Luke. Okay. Oh. No, it's not in Luke.
Okay.
Psalm 103:12, maybe? Try that one.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us.
So with that, would the sins appear in the records? Is that a different removal from us, or how do you see it?
Anybody want to take a shot at that one?
Oh, go, Bobby. You gotta.
I wanted to hear what somebody else thought first.
I mean, it is poetic, right? It is, sometimes the psalmist takes poetic license. There's hyperbole, exaggeration,
Hey, Wendell, I got an idea.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it has to, because I've mentioned it before, our brains remember everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I truly believe what's being opened up is just our thoughts that we have. It's basically, this was you. And it's almost like a comparison. This was you, but this is you now. I think it's pretty powerful.
So,
Okay.
So to build on that, so if I can jump in on with Frank, to build on that, if it were just about accounting, meaning a piece of paper in a book where it's recorded, there is a dilemma in Scripture that is created by the verse that you brought up, Wendell, because we keep trying to figure out. So did he separate them as far as east from the west? Like, did he get rid of them? Did he throw them away, or did he keep them in the book? And when we connect what Frank just said, we have this ability to put the two together, I think, and that is that removing the sin from me, it says, I will remove the iniquities from the people as far as east is from the west. He's talking about taking sin out of us so it doesn't dwell in us anymore. But the records, which Frank just pointed to, but I can remember what I am without Christ, what I was before Christ, and what I will be again if I don't have Christ, right? I think at the end of the 1,000 years, the righteous who spent that 1,000 years with Christ That's why I asked the question in the beginning of this discussion. Will they still be experiencing what we read about in this chapter? And I'd say yes, not because they are sinful. They've actually been, remade, reformed as new creatures, sin gone, but their record will know exactly what they are without Christ. And so it's kind of this dual thing where it's gone, but we know so well what we are without Jesus that we will have the same sort of view of ourselves that this man in the parable did, and we'll be
And
clinging
Bobby,
to
to
Christ
springboard
alone.
off that,
Go ahead, Frank.
because of that, I truly believe that's why sin won't rise up again.
Yes. Anyway, so I think that's why the two can coexist. It's not
Yes.
that God is reminding us, look what terrible things you did. We read this last week in Testimonies Volume 4. It says a chapter in there called The Judgment in Testimonies Volume 4. And part of the description that she gives kind of from this vision about the judgment is the idea that when Jesus's eye just passes over, looks across the crowd, both when he was here, but more so, say, after the 1,000 years, just his eye passing over them, they will know that their sins are like burned into their, almost like letters of fire on their forehead, which I think is a description to explain what Frank said, is that it's not that Jesus needs to read them and announce them to everybody. Just his presence will make it so that each one is fully aware of what they have been, what they've either been with or without Christ all the way through. And so the righteous, it's depicted as though they take their crowns off and they put them at Jesus' feet, because they're saying, yeah, none of this that has happened to me can I claim as achieved by me. All of it is Christ, what he's done in me. And those kind of all go together with that idea of judgment. So I think it is true, the safest place for us to be is to be very familiar with what it's like to be the guy beating his chest. Not just because we're going through the motions, but I mean, really, like the paragraph Barb read about, often we should have to be bowed down, brokenhearted because of what we are without Christ. And that's the only safe place to be.
I just thought of some I won't be able to make next week, which is kind of sad because I'm looking forward to it, but I have to work. So I just pray for a blessing for you guys next week.
Well, send us an email with your couple of thoughts on it you want us to not miss.
Yeah, I may do that.
Yeah, then we'll make sure we cover them. Good question, Wendell. I don't know if that helped any, but
yeah, it did. Thank you.
You guys have a wonderful evening.
Okay, we'll see you, Frank.
Night, everyone.
See you, Frank. Take care.
Good
Anybody
night.
else got a thought or a question they want to toss around? If not, we'll assume we wore you out sufficiently.
All right. Good night.
Okay, good night,
Okay,
everybody.
good night, everyone. Take care.